The sun was setting in a cascade of gold and pink, casting long shadows across the sterile white walls of St. Clara's Hospital. Michael stood outside room 217, a bouquet of lilies in his hand, his heart thudding unevenly in his chest. He took a deep breath, the floral scent mingling with the antiseptic air, steeling himself to see Sarah, his wife, lying frail on the hospital bed. Pushing the door open, Michael's gaze immediately fell on Sarah, her complexion ashen, yet when she saw him, a weak smile flickered across her lips. "Hey," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Michael moved to her side, setting the flowers on the bedside table, and took her hand gently. "Hey, love. How are you feeling today?" "Tired and scared," she admitted, squeezing his hand. The fear in her eyes was palpable, and it sent a sharp pain through Michael's heart. "Dr. Reynolds will take good care of you. We'll find a donor, Sarah. I promise." Dr. Richard Reynolds chose that moment to enter, his presence commanding yet reassuring. Sighed, setting the flower, his white coat immaculate, his smile warm. "Good evening, Michael, Sarah. I have some news." Michael stood up, anxious. "Yes, doctor?" "Well, we have a potential donor. A match. It's actually quite unexpected." Sarah's eyes widened, hope sparking in them for the first time in weeks. "Who?" Dr. Reynolds glanced at Michael, then back at Sarah. "Michael. He's a perfect match." Sarah gasped, turning to her husband, tears brimming. "Michael, you didn't." "I did," he said firmly, kneeling beside her bed. "I love you, Sarah. I'm going to do this for you." The next few weeks blurred into a whirlwind of preparations. Michael underwent numerous tests, and finally, the day of the transplant arrived. As they were wheeled into adjacent operating rooms, Michael reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand. "See you on the other side, my love." "Thank you," she mouthed, tears rolling down her cheeks. The surgery was a success, but the recovery was slow and fraught with complications. Michael spent his days and nights by Sarah's side, his own pain a dull echo compared to his fear for her well-being. It was during one of these long nights, 3 months post-surgery, that Michael stepped out to get some fresh air, his body aching, his mind weary. When he returned, passing by Dr. Reynolds' office, he heard laughter, a sound so starkly contrasting with the usual somber tones of the hospital that he paused. Curiosity piqued, he peered through the slightly ajar door. There was Sarah, alive with laughter, sitting far too close to Dr. Reynolds. Their hands touched, their heads bent together intimately. Michael felt as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, flooded his veins. He stood frozen, unable to look away, as his heart shattered. Days later, the confrontation was inevitable. "How could you?" Michael's voice was a harsh whisper, confrontational yet heartbroken. Sarah's eyes were wide, guilty. "Michael, No. Save it. I've seen enough," he cut her off, his decision cemented by the cold fury settling in his bones. And from there, Michael set about his revenge. His love had turned to venom, and he would ensure neither Sarah nor Dr. Reynolds would find peace. His methods were methodical, calculated to cause maximum disruption, professional complaints, rumors ignited, relationships poisoned. When the dust settled, Sarah was gone, the house was silent, and Michael's heart was a fortress of ice. As he stared at the divorce papers on his kitchen table, he realized their paths would never cross again. He had ensured it. But as the nights grew longer and the silence in his house grew deeper, Michael wondered if the price of his vengeance was worth the hollow victory he now held in his hands. Michael sat at the bar of the dimly lit Red Fox Tavern, the clink of glasses and low hum of conversations filling the space around him. He nursed a whiskey, the burn a minor distraction from the turmoil inside him. He had destroyed everything he once held dear, and yet the bitterness lingered like an uninvited guest. "Rough day?" The bartender, a wiry man with sharp eyes named Tom, poured another drink for him without waiting for an answer. "Rough few months," Michael corrected, his gaze fixed on the amber liquid. Tom nodded, accustomed to the sorrow that often accompanied his patrons. You want to talk about it? Michael shook his head, then paused. Actually, yeah. My ex-wife cheated on me. With her doctor, no less. After I gave her a part of myself. Tom whistled lowly. That's rough, buddy. Sorry to hear that. The door to the tavern opened, admitting a cool gust of air and two figures, Jenna, a local reporter known for her tenacious nature, and her companion, a tall, burly man named Hank, who worked in security. Jenna spotted Michael and waved, heading over. Michael, how are you holding up? Not great, Jenna, Michael admitted as they took the seats next to him. Hank's brow furrowed in sympathy. Heard about your ordeal. If there's anything we can do. Actually, there might be, Michael interrupted, an idea forming in his mind. Jenna, you're always looking for a good story, right? Her eyes lit up with interest. Always. What do you have in mind? I want to expose him, Dr. Reynolds. Show everyone what he really is, Michael said, his voice hardening. Jenna leaned in, her recorder already out. I'm listening. Michael detailed everything, from the affair to how he'd seen them together, to his own acts of revenge that left him empty. I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Jenna nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. This could be big, Michael. If we can prove it, it's not just a scandal, it's a serious breach of professional ethics. And I can help dig up some info, Hank added, pulling out his phone. I know people who might know a few more who can get us what we need. The trio spent the next hour plotting their next moves. Jenna would start by interviewing people at the hospital anonymously, Hank would use his contacts to gather more background on Dr. Reynolds, and Michael would dig through the evidence he had, looking for anything they could use. As they stood to leave, a sense of purpose settled over Michael for the first time in months. Thanks, both of you. For helping. Hey, we're in this together now, Jenna said, a determined glint in her eye. Let's take this guy down. As Michael walked out into the chilly night, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. Revenge had left him hollow, but this pursuit of justice might just be what he needed to rebuild something resembling a life. But deep down, he knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, and Dr. Reynolds would not go down without a fight. The storm was just beginning. As autumn leaves blanket the city, Michael feels a chill that isn't entirely due to the brisk air. He's meeting Jenna and Hank at a small, inconspicuous cafe where the buzz of daily gossip is loud enough to cover their conversation. First, a folder bulging with papers under his arm. Got something that might interest you, he says, sliding into the booth. Michael scans the documents, email exchanges, hospital memos, and a few photographs of Dr. Reynolds at various less-than-professional gatherings. Where did you get these? Friend of a friend in the IT department. Reynolds isn't as clean as he likes to appear, Hank replies, his voice low. Jenna arrives, breathless, her eyes bright with the thrill of the chase. I talked to 3 nurses, left him hollow, but this discord, they've seen Reynolds pulling the same routine with other vulnerable patients. It's a pattern, something that might interest you. Michael clenches his fists, anger mingling with a sense of vindication. We need more solid proof. Something irrefutable. That's where I come in, Jenna says, pulling out her laptop. I'm going undercover. I've arranged to interview Reynolds about his outstanding service and care for the hospital newsletter. We'll see what slips out when he's basking in his own ego. The next day, Jenna, wired with a hidden microphone, enters Dr. Reynolds' office. The office is plush, lined with certificates and accolades. Reynolds greets her with a slick, practiced smile. Dr. Reynolds, thank you for meeting with me today, Jenna begins, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It's my pleasure, Jenna. I always have time for the press, Reynolds smirks, settling behind his desk. As Jenna poses her questions, she steers the conversation subtly towards ethics and patient relationships. Reynolds, relaxed and unaware of her true intent, boasts lightly about his close connections with his patients. Trust is crucial, he says, leaning back. Sometimes, you need to go beyond the call of duty to really help someone heal. Any particular instances that stand out? Jenna probes, hoping he'll reveal more than he intends. Reynolds pauses, a flash of caution crossing his features, but vanity wins out. Well, there was this one patient, extremely challenging case. But we became very close. It was rewarding to see her recover. Jenna's heart pounds. Could he be referring to Sarah? She pushes a little more, but Reynolds senses the danger and retreats behind vague platitudes. After the interview, Jenna meets Michael and Hank at the cafe again. He's cautious, but I got him on tape talking about being very close to a patient. It's not enough on its own, but it's a start. We need someone on the inside, Michael says, an idea forming. Someone who can get us more. That's risky, Hank counters. But it might be our only shot. They decide to approach one of the nurses Jenna spoke with, hoping to persuade her to help. After careful negotiation, she agrees to keep her eyes and ears open for any more damning evidence against Reynolds. Each day that passes, Michael feels the net tightening around Dr. Reynolds, each piece of gathered evidence a step closer to exposing the truth. Yet, as they draw closer to their goal, Michael can't shake the fear that they are also walking into deeper danger. Every shadow seems menacing, every phone call a potential threat. As Michael lies awake at night, he knows they are on the right path. But the closer they get to exposing Dr. Reynolds, the more he realizes that the fallout might be more explosive than any of them anticipated. The fight for justice is turning into a battle, and in battles, there are always casualties. Winter's chill blankets the city, but inside the bustling courtroom, the air is thick with tension. Michael sits stiffly, his gaze fixed on Dr. Reynolds, who occupies the defendant's bench, a mask of calm professionalism failing to hide the flicker of anxiety. Jenna, sitting next to Michael, leans over. It's almost over, she whispers, squeezing his hand. The trial has dragged on for weeks, but today, the final pieces of evidence will be presented. Hank enters the courtroom just as the session is about to resume, handing Jenna a small USB drive. Got it, he mutters under his breath. This is the nail in the coffin. Jenna gives him a tight nod and stands, ready to present their final evidence. As she addresses the court, detailing the pattern of Dr. Reynolds' misconduct with patients, she inserts the drive and plays a recording. It's a damning conversation between Dr. Reynolds and another doctor, discussing a similar case from years ago. The courtroom erupts into murmurs as the reality of Dr. Reynolds' behavior comes to light. Reynolds' lawyer tries to interject, but the damage is clear. The jury's faces are set, their judgment nearly palpable in the silent moments that follow. In the wake of the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of professional misconduct, Michael feels a hollow victory. Dr. Reynolds' career is effectively over, his reputation in ruins. Outside the courthouse, as reporters swarm, Jenna turns to Michael. You got what you wanted, Michael. Justice. It doesn't feel like I thought it would, Michael admits, his voice low. As the crowd disperses, Sarah approaches Michael, her eyes weary, her posture defeated. Michael, can we talk? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitates, looking at her, the woman he once loved so deeply. Finally, he nods, and they move to a quiet corner away from the prying eyes. I never thanked you, Sarah starts, her voice trembling. For saving my life. It doesn't matter now, Sarah, Michael says stiffly. It does to me, she insists. And I'm sorry, Michael. For everything. Michael searches her face, looking for the woman he married, but too much has changed. I can't forgive you, Sarah. Not for this. I know, she says, a tear escaping down her cheek. I hope you find some peace, Michael. They part, and as Michael watches her walk away, he feels the final thread of their connection sever. Jenna joins him again, a speculative look in her eyes. What will you do now? Move on, Michael replies, more to himself than to her. Try to rebuild something new from the ruins. As he walks away, the weight of the past years starts to lift, ever so slightly. Michael knows the road ahead is uncertain and likely lonely. But for the first time in a long time, he feels ready to face it. The intrigue of his wife's betrayal and the battle for justice had dominated his life, but now, as he steps out into the cold sunlight, Michael embraces the possibility of a new beginning, one where the shadows of deceit no longer darken his path.